You don't teach someone your worth by explaining it to them. You teach them by making them feel the loss. You see, people only truly value what they believe they can lose. If someone takes you for granted, it's not because they don't know your worth. It's because they believe you will always be there, no matter how they treat you. When someone takes you for granted, the instinctive reaction is often to explain, justify, or try to make them see your worth. You might find yourself constantly reminding them of everything you do, pointing out your sacrifices, or expressing frustration over their lack of appreciation. This is a natural response because deep down, you believe that if they just understood how much you bring to their life, they would change their behavior. But here's the truth. Value is not explained, it is demonstrated. The more you try to convince someone of your worth, the more you diminish it. The more you explain yourself, the less they feel the need to recognize what you bring to the table. Think about it. Have you ever had to convince someone of the value of gold? Have you ever seen a diamond beg someone to appreciate it? Of course not. Things of value don't have to explain themselves. They simply exist in their rarity, and because of that, they are sought after. The moment you start justifying your importance in someone's life, you unknowingly place yourself in a position of weakness. You are now seeking validation, and the person on the other side knows it. They can feel your energy shift from confidence to desperation. They see that you are no longer standing in your power, but instead trying to prove your place in their life. And let me tell you, people do not value what is desperate for validation. They value what is rare, what is self-assured, and what can walk away without hesitation. If you want to teach someone the cost of taking you for granted, stop over-explaining your worth. Stop trying to make them see it through words, because words alone do not change how someone perceives you. People do not appreciate what is constantly available, and they certainly do not value what they believe will always be there, no matter how they treat it. If someone has grown accustomed to your presence without effort, if they have normalized your kindness without gratitude, if they expect your energy without reciprocation, then talking about your worth will not change a thing. The only way to shift the dynamic is by shifting your behavior. When someone doesn't see your value, you don't negotiate with them. You don't sit them down and make a case for why they should treat you better. Instead, you demonstrate your worth through action. You stop answering every call. You stop making them a priority when they have made you an afterthought. You pull back your energy, your attention, your kindness, and most importantly, your presence. Because nothing makes a person evaluate your worth faster than the reality of losing you. Now, some people will argue, but what if they don't even care if I pull away? What if my absence doesn't affect them? That in itself is an answer. If someone truly does not care when you step back, then they never valued you in the first place. And that is painful to accept, but it is also liberating. Because the worst thing you can do is waste your time trying to convince someone who never intended to appreciate you to begin with. If your absence means nothing to them, then your presence never meant anything either. That is not a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of their blindness to it. And that blindness is not your responsibility to cure. The people who truly value you will notice when your energy shifts. They will feel the change. They will realize that something they took for granted is no longer guaranteed. And that realization will force them to reassess how they treat you. If they truly care, they will adjust. If they don't, they will let you walk away without a fight, and either way, you win. This is why over-explaining your worth is a waste of time. It places the power in someone else's hands, making their acknowledgement the deciding factor in your self-esteem. But when you shift your focus from explaining to demonstrating, you take back control. You no longer wait for someone to validate your existence. You validate yourself. You recognize that you do not need to be understood by everyone to be valuable. You do not need constant reassurance to know your place. You are worthy simply because you are. And that worth does not decrease because someone else is too blind to see it. So the next time you feel tempted to explain why you deserve respect, why your efforts should be appreciated, or why you should be treated better, stop yourself. Instead, ask yourself, why am I trying to convince someone of something they should already see? Why am I putting energy into proving myself to someone who doesn't naturally appreciate what I bring? And most importantly, what happens if I stop explaining and start showing them instead through my actions? Because the truth is, words can be ignored, but absence is undeniable. The moment you stop over-explaining and start moving differently, people take notice. They may not acknowledge it immediately, but they will feel the shift. And that shift alone is enough to make them question everything they took for granted. When someone takes you for granted, the natural reaction is to express your frustration, to argue, to demand an explanation for their behavior. You want them to understand how much they have hurt you. You want them to realize that they are losing someone valuable. But here's the problem. Words don't always teach people lessons. In fact, the more you talk, the less they listen. The more you argue, the more they dismiss your words as emotional noise. You think you're making them see your worth, but all they hear is a plea for attention, a desperate attempt to be acknowledged. And the truth is, nothing pushes people away faster than the feeling that they are being pressured to care. Silence is not weakness. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you have when dealing with people who take you for granted. Silence forces a person to sit with their own thoughts, to process the shift in energy, to feel the absence of what they once overlooked. When you argue, when you explain, when you chase, you give them a sense of control. They know they still have your attention. They know that no matter how they treat you, you will always be there to react. And when people know they have your reaction, they don't feel the need to change. They assume you'll always be around, no matter how they act. The moment you choose silence, everything changes. It's in silence that people start to wonder. They start to question. They start to feel a sense of unease because silence disrupts the pattern. They were used to you responding. They were used to you explaining yourself, defending yourself, trying to make things right. They were used to knowing exactly where they stood with you. But now they don't. Now they have to guess. Now they have to sit in the uncertainty of not knowing what you're thinking or what you're going to do next. People don't appreciate noise. They tune it out. But absence is loud. Absence is something that creeps into their thoughts unexpectedly. Absence is what makes them realize, wait, something is different. And that's when they start to feel what they never felt before, your value. Not because you told them, not because you forced them to acknowledge it, but because they experience what life feels like without you. You see, people take things for granted when they believe they will always be there. They assume that no matter how little effort they put in, you will continue to show up, continue to be available, continue to give them your attention. But what happens when that assumption is disrupted? What happens when the person they thought would always answer suddenly stops replying? What happens when the person they thought would always care suddenly seems indifferent? That's when the real panic sets in. At first, they might not react. They might assume that you're just having a bad day, that you'll eventually come back like you always do. But as time passes and your silence continues, their confidence starts to waver. They begin to wonder if they've pushed too far, if they finally crossed a line they can't undo. That uncertainty creates discomfort, and discomfort leads to reflection. Reflection leads to realization, and realization leads to change. This is why silence is so powerful. It doesn't beg, it doesn't force, it doesn't argue. It simply removes itself, allowing the other person to feel the weight of their own actions. And if they truly care, they will notice. If they truly value you, they will step up. Not because you told them to, but because they experience the difference in your absence. Now, some people will test your silence. They will try to provoke a reaction from you. They will send a message just to see if you'll respond. They might act out, hoping you'll get angry, because even your anger is still attention. But the worst thing you can do is break your silence too soon. The moment you respond, you teach them that your silence was just a tactic, not a true shift in your mindset. You teach them that all they have to do is wait long enough, and eventually you'll come back. And once they know that, they will never truly value your silence again. You have to be willing to stay silent, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when every part of you wants to explain yourself, even when you want to scream at them for not caring, for not noticing, for not treating you better. Because silence is not just about teaching them a lesson. It's about teaching yourself discipline. It's about proving to yourself that you are strong enough to walk away from situations that do not serve you. It's about recognizing that your worth is not something that needs to be constantly defended, justified, or proven to anyone. There's a saying that goes, if your absence doesn't bother them, then your presence never mattered. And that is a painful truth to accept, but it is also a freeing one. Because when you realize that someone truly does not care, you stop wasting your time. You stop fighting for a seat at a table where you were never truly wanted. You stop begging for a place in someone's life when they were perfectly content taking you for granted. And that is when you reclaim your power. That is when you stop being someone who pleads for recognition and start being someone who demands respect. Not through words, not through arguments, but through the undeniable impact of your silence. When you make yourself too available, people start to assume that your presence is a given. They no longer see it as a privilege. They see it as an entitlement. The more predictable you are, the less effort they feel they need to put in. The moment you are always accessible, always the one to initiate, always the one making sacrifices, they start to believe that they don't have to work to keep you in their life. And that is how being taken for granted begins. Not because people are inherently ungrateful, but because human nature adjusts to what is always there. When something is always within reach, it no longer feels valuable. It becomes background noise. Think about anything rare in life. Diamonds, gold, even opportunities. The reason they are valued so highly is because they are not easily found. They are not scattered everywhere, available for just anyone to pick up. They require effort to obtain. Now compare that to something abundant, like air. Air is essential to life, yet most people don't think about it. They don't stop to appreciate it. Why? Because it's always there. It's everywhere. The only time people truly notice air is when they don't have enough of it, when they're struggling to breathe. That's when it suddenly becomes valuable. This is how people operate in relationships. They value what requires effort. They appreciate what is not guaranteed. But when you give without limits, when you show up every time without hesitation, when you sacrifice without expecting anything in return, you train people to expect it. You teach them that no matter what they do, no matter how little effort they put in, you will always be there. And once they believe that, they stop putting in effort. They stop appreciating. They stop valuing, not necessarily because they don't care, but because they have no reason to believe they might lose you. This is why pulling back is so important. When you start to distance yourself, when you make yourself less available, when you stop initiating every conversation, people start to notice. At first, they may not react. They may assume that you're just busy or having an off day. But as the pattern continues, as they experience what life feels like without your constant presence, something shifts. They begin to wonder. They begin to question. They start to feel something they didn't feel before. Uncertainty. And uncertainty is powerful. Because uncertainty creates curiosity. It creates the need to seek answers. And when someone is unsure about where they stand with you, they are forced to think about you in a way they never did before. They start to ask themselves questions. Why aren't they reaching out like they used to? Why do I feel like I'm losing something? What if they're pulling away for good? These thoughts create discomfort. And discomfort leads to action. Now, not everyone will react the same way. Some people will brush it off at first, assuming that you'll eventually go back to your old ways. But as time passes and they continue to experience your absence, they will either realize your worth and step up, or they will show you through their inaction that they never truly valued you in the first place. Either way, you win. Because the people who genuinely care will start putting in effort. They will reach out. They will check in. They will show you that they notice the difference. And the ones who never really valued you, they will fade away. And that is a painful but necessary truth to accept. This is not about playing games. This is not about manipulation. It's about balance. It's about recognizing that you cannot pour endlessly into people who do not pour back into you. It's about understanding that availability must be earned, not given freely. When you make yourself too accessible, you remove the incentive for people to appreciate you. But when you create space, when you allow people to feel your absence, you give them the opportunity to truly recognize your worth. Some people fear pulling back because they believe that if they do, the other person will forget about them. And that fear keeps them stuck in a cycle of overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending themselves. But here's the truth. If someone forgets about you simply because you stop making all the effort, then they never truly valued you in the first place. The right people will notice. The right people will care. The right people will make an effort to keep you in their life. And those who don't, they were never meant to stay. When you remove yourself from situations where you are being taken for granted, you send a clear message without saying a single word. You communicate that your presence is not a given. You establish that you are not someone who will stay where they are not valued. You shift the dynamic from being someone who chases to being someone who is pursued. And in that shift, you regain your power. You remind yourself that you are not dependent on anyone's validation. You are not someone who needs to beg for attention, for appreciation, for basic respect. You are someone who chooses where to invest their energy. And that choice is everything, because the moment you decide to stop giving endlessly to people who do not reciprocate, you open yourself up to relationships that are built on mutual effort, mutual respect, and mutual appreciation. You stop settling for crumbs and start demanding the full meal. You stop wasting energy on people who do not see your worth and start attracting those who do. And when that happens, everything changes. People don't value what is easy to get. They value what they have to work for, what they have to invest in, and what they fear losing. When someone believes they can treat you however they want and you will still be there, They lose any sense of urgency to treat you well. They don't feel the need to change, to step up, or to appreciate you because in their mind you are always an option. They believe you will always forgive, always understand, always tolerate. And as long as they believe that, they will never truly respect you. The reason so many people get taken for granted is because they allow it. Not intentionally, not because they enjoy it, but because they're afraid. Afraid of losing someone, afraid of conflict, afraid of being alone. So they make excuses for bad behavior. They rationalize mistreatment. They convince themselves that if they just wait a little longer, if they just give a little more, the other person will change. But that's not how human nature works. People don't change when you tolerate their behavior. They change when they have to. They change when the consequences of their actions become too uncomfortable to ignore. This is why setting boundaries is crucial. A boundary is not about controlling someone else's behavior. It's about controlling your response to that behavior. It's about deciding what you will and will not accept. It's about refusing to participate in dynamics where you are not respected. A boundary is saying, if you continue to treat me this way, I will remove myself from the situation. It is not a threat. It is not an attempt to manipulate. It is simply a declaration of self-respect. The problem is, most people set weak boundaries. They say they won't tolerate something, but then when it happens, they let it slide. They justify it. They say maybe it was just a mistake, or maybe I'm overreacting. And each time they do that, they send a silent message, I don't really mean what I say. And the moment someone realizes that your boundaries are flexible, they will keep testing them. They will push further and further, knowing that in the end, you won't do anything about it. Strong boundaries require action. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, it is not enough to tell them to stop. You have to show them. You have to be willing to walk away. You have to be willing to enforce the consequences, because words without actions are meaningless. If you tell someone that you won't tolerate being treated a certain way, but then you stay and continue to give them access to you, you are teaching them that your words carry no weight. People learn how to treat you based on what you allow. If you always answer the phone when they call, even after they've ignored you for weeks, they will learn that they can come and go as they please. If you always say yes to their requests, even when they never do the same for you, they will learn that they don't have to reciprocate. If you continue to give to someone who never gives back, they will learn that they don't have to invest in you because you are willing to accept the bare minimum. This is why taking action is the most powerful statement you can make. Stop explaining yourself. Stop arguing. Stop trying to convince someone to appreciate you. Instead, let your absence speak. Let your silence be your response. Let your actions show that you mean what you say. When you remove yourself from situations where you are not valued, you create a shift. You disrupt the pattern. You force the other person to confront the reality that they can no longer take you for granted. At first, they might not react. They might think that you're just upset and that you'll eventually come back like you always do. But as time passes, as they see that you are serious, they will start to feel the weight of your absence. And that is when they will realize what they had. That is when they will start to question themselves. That is when they will either step up and make a change or reveal that they never truly valued you in the first place. Either way, you gain clarity. Either way, you win. But none of this works if you are not consistent. If you pull away, but then come back at the first sign of guilt or regret, you undo all of your progress. You have to stand firm. You have to be willing to lose people who do not respect you. You have to trust that the right people will always choose to value you, and the wrong people will remove themselves. It is not easy. It takes strength, it takes discipline, but it is necessary. Because the longer you allow yourself to be taken for granted, the more it will continue. The longer you stay in situations where you are not appreciated, the harder it becomes to walk away. And the more you convince yourself that this is just how relationships are, the more you lower your own standards. Boundaries are not just about protecting yourself from others. They are about protecting your own self-worth. They are about reminding yourself that you deserve to be valued, respected, and appreciated. They are about ensuring that the people in your life are there because they truly care, not just because they know they can take advantage of you. When you have given your time, energy, and heart to someone who does not reciprocate it, it's easy to fall into the trap of resentment. You start to feel the weight of all that you have done, all that you have sacrificed, and all the ways in which your efforts have gone unnoticed. And that resentment begins to build like a heavy stone in your chest. It makes you question yourself. It makes you doubt your worth. It makes you wonder why you were not enough for someone to appreciate. But the real issue is not that you were not enough. The real issue is that you kept giving to someone who had no capacity or intention to give back. Resentment is not just about anger. It is about feeling unappreciated, undervalued, and unseen. It is about looking at all the energy you invested and realizing that it was never truly acknowledged. It is about recognizing that you were taken for granted, that your kindness was mistaken for weakness, that your efforts were expected rather than appreciated. And that realization can be painful. But what is even more painful is holding on to that resentment, allowing it to eat away at you, allowing it to control your emotions and your self-perception. The problem with resentment is that it does not change the past. It does not make the other person suddenly appreciate you. It does not force them to wake up one day and realize what they lost. It does not undo the hurt. What it does is keep you stuck in a cycle of negative emotions. It makes you replay the moments in your mind, analyzing what you could have done differently, questioning whether you should have left sooner, wondering if they will ever regret how they treated you. And all of that mental energy is being wasted on someone who has already shown you who they are. The only way to truly overcome resentment is to shift your focus away from them and back to yourself. You cannot control how someone else sees you. You cannot control whether they will ever recognize your worth. But you can control what you do with your energy moving forward. You can choose to stop pouring into people who do not value you. You can choose to set new standards for how you allow yourself to be treated. You can choose to redirect all of that time and effort back into yourself. This is not about ignoring your feelings. It is about acknowledging them and then deciding that they will not define you. Because if you allow resentment to take root, it will shape the way you see yourself. It will make you hesitant to trust, hesitant to give, hesitant to believe that you deserve better. And the longer you carry that resentment, the heavier it becomes. It starts to cloud your judgment, affecting not just your relationships, but your sense of self-worth. Letting go of resentment is not about forgiving the other person for their sake. It is about freeing yourself. It is about refusing to let their inability to appreciate you determine how you feel about yourself. It is about recognizing that their lack of effort was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of their character. You do not need closure from them. You do not need an apology. You do not need validation from someone who is incapable of valuing you in the first place. The best way to overcome resentment is to refocus your energy. Instead of asking why they did not appreciate you, ask yourself why you continued to stay in a situation where you were not valued. Instead of wondering if they will regret losing you, ask yourself what you have learned from this experience. Instead of wasting energy on someone who did not deserve it, invest that energy into yourself. Prioritize your growth, your peace, your happiness. Make sure that the next time you give your energy to someone, it is to someone who truly deserves it. One of the hardest truths to accept is that some people will never realize your worth until you are no longer available to them. And even then, their regret does not mean they valued you. It just means they lost the convenience of having you there. That is not love. That is not appreciation. That is just entitlement. And you deserve more than that. You deserve people who see your value while you are still present, not just when you are gone. Resentment keeps you tied to the past, but your power lies in the present. Your power lies in your ability to take what you have learned and use it to elevate yourself. The moment you decide that you will no longer carry bitterness, that you will no longer hold on to anger, that you will no longer waste energy on what was, you reclaim control over your life. You shift from being a victim of your circumstances to being the creator of your future. You reclaim control over your life. You shift from being a victim of your circumstances to being the creator of your future. And that is when everything changes. Healing from being taken for granted is not just about moving on from a specific person or situation. It is about rebuilding the way you see yourself. When someone continuously undervalues you, it can leave a deep imprint on your self-esteem. It can make you question whether you were ever truly worthy of appreciation in the first place. You start to wonder if maybe you expected too much, if maybe you were too sensitive, if maybe you should have settled for what little they were willing to give. But that mindset is dangerous because it conditions you to accept less than you deserve. It makes you believe that being undervalued is just a part of life, that disappointment is inevitable, that real appreciation is something rare and reserved for others. The truth is, healing is not about them. It is not about waiting for an apology, not about hoping they will realize what they lost, not about seeking revenge or proving a point. It is about reclaiming your self-worth. It is about reminding yourself that you were always enough. It is about understanding that the way they treated you was a reflection of them, not a reflection of you. But knowing this intellectually is not enough. You have to internalize it. You have to reprogram your mind to see yourself differently, to value yourself in ways that others failed to. The first step to healing is acceptance. You have to accept that you were taken for granted. Not sugarcoat it, not make excuses for it, not tell yourself that it wasn't that bad. You have to face the reality of what happened, not to dwell in pain, but to acknowledge what you will no longer tolerate. You have to be honest with yourself about how you ignored the signs, about how you allowed yourself to stay in a situation that was slowly chipping away at your self-worth. Not to blame yourself, but to take accountability for your own healing. Because healing is a choice. It is a decision to no longer let the past define you. The next step is detachment. Detachment does not mean that you erase the memories, nor does it mean that you pretend the pain never happened. Detachment means removing the emotional weight from the situation. It means no longer looking for closure, no longer replaying the past, no longer tying your happiness to whether or not they regret losing you. It means understanding that your worth is not dependent on their validation. It means walking away without bitterness, without resentment, without the need to prove anything. Healing also requires self-reflection. You have to ask yourself why you allowed yourself to be taken for granted. Was it because you were afraid of losing them? Was it because you were afraid of being alone? Was it because you tied your worth to their approval? Healing is about confronting those fears and breaking those patterns. Because if you do not, you will find yourself in the same situation again, just with different people. The universe will keep presenting the same lesson until you finally learn it. Self-love is the foundation of healing. You have to start treating yourself the way you wished they had treated you. You have to appreciate yourself the way they failed to. You have to prioritize yourself in ways that they never did. Because when you do, you will attract people who match that energy. People who truly see you. People who appreciate you without you having to beg for it. People who value you not for what you can do for them, but simply for who you are. But that starts with you. It starts with the way you see yourself. It starts with the standards you set, with the way you allow yourself to be treated, with the energy you give and the energy you refuse to entertain. Healing is also about rediscovering yourself. When you have spent so much time being overlooked, ignored, or unappreciated, it is easy to lose sight of who you are. It is easy to become so consumed with proving your worth that you forget you never had to prove it in the first place. Now is the time to reconnect with yourself, to remember your value, to rediscover what brings you joy, what excites you, what makes you feel alive. Now is the time to pour into yourself the way you poured into others. Now is the time to give yourself all the love, energy, and attention that you so freely gave away. The most powerful thing you can do is rebuild yourself in such a way that the person who took you for granted could never recognize you now. Not because you changed for them, but because you finally became who you were always meant to be. Not because you want them to regret losing you, but because you no longer need their validation. Not because you want to prove a point, but because you now understand that you were always worthy. That their inability to see your value was their loss, not yours. True healing is not about moving on quickly. It is about moving on completely. It is about no longer being emotionally tied to the situation. It is about reaching a point where you do not feel anger, sadness, or resentment when you think about what happened. It is about getting to a place where their actions no longer affect your energy. And that kind of healing takes time, but it is worth it. Because once you heal, you will never again allow yourself to be taken for granted. You will never again settle for less than you deserve. You will never again question your worth based on someone else's inability to see it.